Hello guys, how are you? Today we're gonna be talking about Principles by Ray Dalio. What were the life principles and work principles that Ray Dalio used in the process of creating and managing the largest hedge fund in the world, which was built around 40 years ago and nowadays is still the largest hedge fund in the world? So, which principles led Ray Dalio to success and Bridgewater to success, which is Ray Dalio's hedge fund? Which ways he used to manage his employees? Which frameworking thinking or ways of thinking he used in order to get work done, in order to get the best version of himself out? So, he split this book into life principles and work principles, but I'll come to this a little bit later. Firstly, who is Ray Dalio? I don't know if many of you are aware of who Ray Dalio is, but Ray Dalio was a highly influential American investor, hedge fund manager, and author, as you can see here. So he is the founder of Bridgewater Associates, which is the world's largest and most successful hedge fund, and he's known for his unique investment philosophy and principles-based approach in life and at work. So Dalio emphasizes radical transparency, thoughtful disagreement, and a deep understanding of economic and market cycles. Ray Dalio has a personal fortune of approximately $19 billion, for you to get an idea of his level of success when talking in numbers. So why did Ray Dalio came up with this? So Ray Dalio, throughout his work in Bridgewater, he used a series of working principles that led to a high efficiency and a high level of engagement and low absenteeism level. People and employees, most of them were really happy. There was a high connection, deep relationships between employees. And all of this was due to the working principles that he used at Bridgewater. So after around in the 2016, it wasn't the first time he got accused of being a cult. Like Bridgewater's people were talking, saying that it was kind of a cult. They were criticizing the way they were operating. And in 2016, the Wall Street Journal, they highlighted some of these accusations, where the article detailed some of the experiences of former employees who felt that Bridgewater principles, while some considered innovative, also led to culture that could be perceived as extreme or intolerant of dissent, right? So after some of this criticism, Ray Dalio took the decision to share his principles, his working principles, right? So the world could see the way they worked, the way they operate, what was their culture like, why or what is the culture like, how do they operate, what do they value, what they don't approve, etc. And in addition, he added the life principles, his life principles. So I'm going to be talking mainly about the life principles, and then I would briefly talk about the working principles. Again, if you want, I'll put a summary in the description. So if you want to read it or use it for whatever, there will be a brief summary about the life principles and working principles of Ray Dalio. So let's start with the life principles, okay? So one of the first principles he talks about is embracing reality and being able to deal and cope with it. So the power of understanding, accepting, and working with reality is both practical and beautiful. So facing reality as it is and not as you wish it to be. Accept and learn from the painful truths of life. I think this is like a tip, like a recommendation. This is something that a lot of successful people say: the importance of embracing reality, being aware of what the reality is, not complaining, and just trying to make the best. A friend of mine, he says, life dealt you some cards. You need to use these cards. You know, not everyone has great cards. Some people have really bad hands, right? In terms of like poker playing. So you just need to make the best out of it. Then he uses a 5-step process to get what you want out of life, to solve problems, okay? So for him, the first step in this 5-step process is identify and have clear goals. What are your future goals? Then you need to identify and don't tolerate the problems that stand in the way of you achieving those goals. So you need to identify the goals standing in the way, the obstacles, and don't tolerate them, trying to find a way to solve them. So you need to, step number 3, accurately diagnose the problems to get at the root cause. So let's say you wake up with no energy. This is the problem this is the obstacle, for example, that is not letting you being as efficient as you want to be during the day. But then you need to analyze what the root, diagnose the problems at the roots causing this lack of energy. So this can be, for example, going to sleep late, not having a routine, eating bad food, not having enough vitamin D, whatever. So you need to go to the root of what's causing the problem in order to target it directly. Then number 4 is design plans that will get you around them. So try to stop this from happening. Identify ways to solve it in the most efficient way. And then number 5, do what's necessary to push these designs through to results. And here I want to mention something really cool, a way of seeing when it comes to decision making, that Ray Dalio talks about it in a cool way, and it's basically first level thinking, I think. So he says like first, second, or third order consequences. So let me give you an example. When we need to make a decision, there are multiple ways of seeing this decision. So for example, I'm done having lunch, so I have 2 options. Either I sit down and look at my phone, or I grab a book and read for 30 minutes, 1 hour. So we have 2 different sides for each of the options. Okay, if I choose my phone, I choose the first order consequence, which is the temptation, right? What costs us what we really want, and sometimes there are barriers that stand in the way when it comes, for example, to choosing the book. So the book is actually what we are looking for is the second order consequence, which is acquiring the knowledge. However, we have the temptation that is the barrier from the first order consequence, that is the fact that we need to sit down and start reading when looking at TikTok or Instagram is much cooler, much more entertaining and easier for our brain. However, the second order consequence is better when reading a book, because the second order consequence of watching TikTok is you are losing time. So this is a cool way of having a look when making decisions, thinking, okay, what is heavier? The first order consequence, the second order consequence, or the third order consequence, etc. As well, I just want to mention something fast that a lot of big and sharp guys in the business industry, they always say that is working smarter rather than harder. And it's already proven that working harder is not always the key for success as we think of, because there is people all over the world working hard every day, and they are born poor and they die poor, and the same from their previous generation and the next generation. They will be working really hard and dying super poor. So he says, I learned that getting more out of life wasn't just a matter of working harder. It was much more a matter of working effectively, because working effectively could increase my capacity by hundreds of times. So here, an example. Then another perspective, another way of being and acting that he recommends is being radically open-minded and transparent. So he says that we need to seek out and consider the best possible feedbacks and perspectives from anything. So transparency builds trust and leads to better decision making. So the fact of being super open-minded, doesn't matter what's your point of view on anything, you always need to try and listen to the opposite side. And being open-minded, listen to what they are saying, try to understand it, and understand why you don't agree with them and why you agree with yourself, what are your points, etc. You will learn much more and you will have a much stronger argument than if you just stay in one side without listening what's the other point of view. And this can be in politics, religion, whatever. Always listening to the opposite side is the best way you can do, and always asking for feedback, trying to get what the other people say. And actually, the other day I was watching a Tai Lopez podcast, and he says they were asking me for some type of practical recommendations when investing. And he says, whenever you're going to invest, for example, in the stock market, you need to listen to the people that is telling you to invest in the stock market and why, what are the reasons, but at the same time you need to listen to the people that are saying don't invest in the stock market and why. Like this, you will have a much more stronger point of view, as you would have both arguments and you can decide based on your knowledge and experience what's the most accurate decision you can make. And then he says the importance of transparency, because being transparent with people builds trust, and this leads to better decision making, because you are clear in your head and you get clear information from the people you're talking with. I wanted to mention as well a cool point of view that he says, look at the machine from the higher level. So think of yourself as a machine operating within a machine, and know that you have the ability to alter your machine to produce better outcomes. So imagine you are actually just like a way of thinking. It's just your brain sending orders to the body in order to become the best possible version, right? So the brain just sends. Imagine if you could always send the best possible order to your body. So every day go to the gym, every day work for 8 hours non-stop, every blah blah blah. Imagine how fast you would be able to evolve, because even though if we want to do all of this, normally there are some barriers, right? We prefer to do something else, someone call us, let's go out, have dinner, your mother tells you blah. We always have things going on at the same time. But imagine if you had the power to order your body to do certain things all the time, the way that your brain's orders to. It would be crazy. So if you think about it from this point of view, you want to make the strongest possible machine, the brain needs to send the best orders for the body to carry out. Then I want to talk about the power of understanding that people are wired very differently from each other. So by recognizing and appreciating the differences in people's perspective and approaches to life, to different things, we need to use these differences to enhance teamwork and problem solving. So our brains are wired differently. So just as our physical attributes determine the limits of what we are able to do physically. Some people are tall, others are short, some muscular, others weak. Our brains are innately different in ways that the parameters of what we are able to do mentally are different. And when I understood this, I understood as well why some people is different to each other, because they may not have the same mental capabilities or the same mental strength that other people. And this, even though you won't agree or you don't, is mostly genetically passed from one generation to another. That's why this is one of the big factors as well why most of the poor people stay poor generation by generation, because they don't pass like high IQ genes, or you know what I mean. So the brain is more complex than we can even imagine. So when we are born, our brains are pre-programmed with learning accumulated for over hundreds of millions of years. For example, researchers at the University of Virginia have shown that while many people have an instinctual fear of snakes, no one has an instinctual fear of flowers. The brain that we were born with had learned that snakes are dangerous and flowers there are not. So that's the reason for that. There is one grand design for the brains of all mammals, fish, birds, amphibians, and reptiles, which was established nearly 300 million years ago and has been evolving ever since. So, the universal brain has evolved from the bottom up, meaning that its lower parts are evolutionarily the oldest and the top parts are the newest. I love to understand how the brain works and which part of the brain which makes each of the decisions. So for example, the brain stem, which is in the lower part of the body, which is in charge of the body basics, for example, subconscious processes that keeps us and other species alive, such as heartbeat, breathing, the nervous system, our alertness. Then the next layer up is the cerebellum, which basically is on top of it, kind of, and it includes the basal ganglia, for example, which is in control of habits, and other parts of the limbic system, which controls, for example, emotional responses. Then we have the cerebral cortex, and then we have in the front we have the prefrontal cortex, sorry, the cerebral cortex, which is like the newest part of our brain, kind of, which is where we learn, we plan, we imagine, and other higher level thoughts come from. So it accounts for a significantly higher ratio of the brain's gray matter than is found in the brains of other species. So as well, by understanding how the human brain evolved, we can understand how it differentiates from other animal species. Then he emphasizes the fact and the strength of having meaningful relationships. He says that we get from the meaningful relationships we get from social cooperation makes us happier, healthier, and more productive. Social cooperation is also integral to effective work. He talks, and this is not the first time I hear this, Tai Lopez says it as well all the time. He says, doesn't matter how bad you go, don't isolate yourself, or doesn't matter, go out, meet people. Like, humans are made to be with each other. This isolating yourself, not being with people around you, is one of the worst things you can do, because humans are made to be with other people. Even though like times have changed a lot, the way we do things, we can become more independent, but still we didn't give enough time to the brain and our genes to adapt to these modern times. these like super recent times, not even the last 5-10 years. So don't isolate yourself. Relationships are super important with other people. Then he talks about inspiration. So he says that some of our greatest moments of inspirations often pump up from our subconscious. So we experience these creative breakthroughs when we are relaxed and not trying to access the part of the brain in which they reside, which is generally the neocortex. And this aligns with the routine Jeff Bezos uses, or that is, for example, when he wakes up, Jeff Bezos, he stays 1 hour in bed, okay, thinking, in this state of half slept, half awake, not thinking, just thinking in the thoughts going through his brain, not waking up fast. Well, Winston Churchill, he used to stay in bed till 2 p.m. You know, Einstein as well, I think he said he had to sleep for 12 hours. So many people only see the conscious mind and aren't aware of the benefits of connecting it to its subconsciousness. So Ray Dalio says that meditation helps him open this connection because it's physiological and you can actually feel the creative thoughts coming from elsewhere and flowing into his conscious mind. So when thoughts and instructions come to us from our subconscious, rather than acting on them immediately, he's got the habit of examining them with their conscious logical mind. So he says that it's helpful to write down the results of this process. And he says that in fact, that's how his principles came about. Then he says the importance of continuously adapt and improve yourself. Personal growth and adaptation are essential for long-term success. Evolve or die. We need to keep being better versions of ourselves, and one of the best ways to do this is by reading. You have access to talk with mentors and authors that have a vast amount of information and experience that can be passed to you. So if you don't have access to talk with them directly, you can read their books. This is the best way of learning and evolving every day, by learning from others' experience. The human that only learns by trial and error will be much slower than the one that can learn by the errors and trials of other people. You don't need to get hit by a truck to know that if you get hit by a truck you will die, at more than 30-40 kilometers per hour, or even 20 kilometers per hour. However, the human that needs to get hit will be much slower than the one that doesn't. Then he says something interesting, that is that everyone, all of us, we are always willing to evolve. It's inside of our genes, the fact of wanting to get better. And sometimes we may confuse the rewards, such as tangible rewards, as cars, watches, or everything, but subconsciously what we are actually aiming for is to evolve, to improve our skills rather than the rewards. But maybe this type of tangible rewards are more some type of conscious and then wanting to evolve ourselves in some type of skills or whatever is more kind of subconscious maybe. Then I'm gonna talk fast about the working principles. It was really cool what he did. Basically, he created some type of baseball cards, the ones that you get by a package, or you used to maybe buy, you go to the little corner store and you bought some of your favorite baseball cards and you open them and you had each of the baseball players, which is advantages, strengths, weaknesses, experience, the previous baseball teams they've been working at, etc., their position in the team. So basically what he did, he created this same concept but for all of his employees. Therefore, when employees or employers had to make teams, had to assign people to different projects, they were able to look at all of the employees working at Bridgewaters and identify which were the best for the task they need to assign someone to. So in these baseball cards, he wrote the weaknesses and strengths of each of the employees at the beginning. This was maybe hard, some people didn't like it, etc. But at the end, the level of efficiency that is achieved with this process is super good. Then he basically applies most of these life principles into the working environment. For example, accepting to make mistakes but not accepting to make mistakes twice. He talks, for example, of one scenario where one of his best employees forgot to put an investment for a client. So he forgot to buy the stock, and then the stock rose exponentially, but unfortunately this employee forgot to buy the stock, so they had to pay all of the amount from their pocket to this client. However, Ray Dalio said that it would be a stupid decision to fire him when he's one of the best employees he had, and this was a mistake. It would be worse for the company to see people how this guy doesn't accept mistakes. Other employees will be more afraid of making mistakes, or they will hide them. So he showed his other employees that it's okay to make mistakes and try to fix them in the best possible way, and learning from them, not making these mistakes twice, and then writing mistakes maybe on post-its and leaving them on the wall so other employees. He really left a super transparent culture at Bridgewater, and nowadays is the largest hedge fund in the world. So this means that it works, his system. The thing that is true that, for example, when he started, he had a super strong relationship with all of the employees, and as the company grows, it's harder to keep a strong and close relationship with all of the employees, of course. But he mostly emphasizes the importance of the radical truth and radical transparency within the organization and between all of the employees. So cultivating meaningful work and meaningful relationships, creating a culture of meritocracy, which basically ensures that the best ideas win out regardless of where they come from, and they reward performance based on merit. Think of the organization as a system, as a machine with processes and people. Improve the machines by improving the processes and finding the right people for the right roles. Again, diagnosing problems to get at the root causes. Know what you don't know and don't pretend to know more than you do. They as well used computers to make decisions and compare computer-made decisions with human-made decisions. Of course, computers being programmed with all the knowledge they use in their heads, but not always computers are able to take decisions in the same ways as humans, etc., etc. So this is some of the stuff he talks about. I liked it, the book, but honestly I was expecting it a bit better. It was actually a friend of mine, Sean from Malta, who gifted me this book for my birthday, and I was super excited. I really wanted to. I'm super thankful, but I was expecting it much better. I think maybe my expectations were too high, but still I think it had some cool knowledge, some cool stuff. But again, I think that when it comes to the top, most of the sharp guys, especially in the business industry, agree on the same kind of stuff, right? But still, not a bad book. Next week we will be talking about The Art of War by Sun Tzu, one of the most important Chinese emperors and conquerors. See you next week, guys.